Greetings. I'm Chris Pfaff. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and I am attending the Fire and Emergency Management program. I have an expected graduation date for my master's degree in December of 2020. I'm here to talk about PPE in relation to the COVID-19 response. The background that I have with PPE in the COVID-19 response is I am a firefighter with West Pierce Fire and Rescue. We are located in Lakewood, Washington, and the biggest thing is when we sit there and take a look back in time, it's difficult sometimes for us to think about this, but back in February of 2020, obviously we understand that COVID was starting to come across our borders into the United States. One of the first locations that COVID actually ended up rearing its head was in Kirkland, Washington, where the Life Care Center up there ended up having a large number of fatalities and a large outbreak, the first known outbreak that we have in the United States. Although it's 50 miles north of West Pierce Fire and Rescue's boundaries, we were under the awareness that it was going to start traveling and travel quickly across the United States, of course hitting our region probably before the rest of the United States. So our PPE game was lacking at that time, and we had to start thinking about things. This was mid-February when this occurred, and we continued to go through a few weeks where we were looking at N95 masks, trying to figure out what type of PPE we needed to wear and how to work with things. It was very, very surreal when I was teaching our Hazmat Operations Academy as the Hazmat team lead and main instructor for my agency as well as many other agencies, that we began instruction that day, and by lunchtime we had to implement newly identified COVID procedures, relocating our students from 2 to a table to 1 in a single table, separating them, to an hour later canceling or at least suspending our initial fire academy for our department at that time. By the end of that day, with the assistance of one of our assistant chiefs with our agency, I was able to contact many of our vendors, and I had been authorized to purchase over $40,000 worth of PPE. That kind of really sent a lot of this home for me in the concept of COVID response. Although we think of this as an EMS entity, which it truly is because the majority of the calls that we go on for COVID are EMS related, it no doubt is a hazmat related experience just as well. So the whole concept that I'm going to talk about here over these next 15 minutes is specifically for air purifying respirators and understanding that. Being an instructor for my agency as well as many other agencies around the region, I understand the concepts of the N95 mask, the P100 mask, combination cartridges, as well as SCBAs, and then all the other forms of chemical protective equipment that's out there. I had to work with our line firefighters and very quickly teach all of our firefighters from a normal air response when we end up going on EMS calls to wearing P100 APRs. In this example, we're using the MSA 420 Advantage. As we continue to go on through with this, we are sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to teach our members how to use this equipment, how to get fit tested for this equipment, and how to properly and fully decontaminate this equipment after use with a known or suspected COVID patient. So the first things that we had to go through is, of course, purchasing the equipment. With this being 2 weeks into the game after the Kirkland event, many other agencies were on the ball and ordering equipment left and right. It took a lot of scrambling, a lot of begging, a lot of scraping across the nation with multiple vendors to procure our respiratory equipment appropriate for our needs. The disappointing thing that I have personally is prior to that I had instructed at other academies across our region, and they had already had these APRs outfitted to their line firefighters. I was actually working at that time prior to COVID for us to get outfitted with each of our line firefighters to have an APR for potential MRSA, respiratory MRSA patients, or looking at future uses for wildland response or other type of dust contamination environments. So after we made the order of this, we ended up getting our MSA 420 Advantage respirators as well as MSA Advantage 200 respirators. The reason our agency decided to go with 2 types of respirators was first to have a primary and to have a backup. The call volume that we have within our agency is significant enough that there is a high potential, and it has happened multiple times, that we respond on a COVID suspected or COVID positive patient, and before we even get back to the station to fully decontaminate our APR, we get tapped out for another call. Therefore, we need a second APR so we do not have cross-contamination. Working and teaching with our members, we ended up creating a video series with our members. As we see here on the right, this was my creation of a video series explaining to our members the difference between our MSA Advantage 420 and our MSA 200, and the difference between our combination filters and our P100 filters. Teaching them pretty much the difference of what the filtration capabilities are, and explaining to them that even though you may start smelling things from this filter is still appropriate for what our needs are.
Chris here with West Pierce Fire and Rescue. I've been working with the respiratory managers to identify donning, doffing, and decontamination procedures for our new half-face APRs that you will all be getting. Some of you already have. So we'll go through at least what our masks are, we'll understand what a filter and a cartridge is, we'll explain the donning and doffing procedures of each of our masks and when we should use them, or at least how we should use them. So first we have right here, this is the MSA Advantage 200 mask. We'll all eventually be getting these masks, and you will be fit tested for these masks. The other mask that we have is the MSA Advantage 420 mask. This mask is a newer mask than the 200, and we will consider this our primary mask for all of our types of calls that we will be using a half-face APR for. So that's the 2 main things that we have right there. We'll talk about our cartridges and our filters very quickly. We have P100 filters. This is going to be the main setup that we have on all of our half-face APRs. Based on availability, we've had to acquire many cartridges. The only difference between a cartridge and a filter is the actual filtration in essence. For our P100 filters, we have a filter very similar to an N95 mask, only it's a higher level of protection. Our P100 cartridges have the exact same filter, but inside it also has an absorbent that'll capture organic vapors. The absorbent material expires after 6 months, but our main focus with these cartridges is the filtration of the P100 filter which is within it. So the end of life for these cartridges and for all of our filters is when breathing resistance is met. There's no time expiration for these. One thing I do want to note with our filters and with our cartridges is we do not want to get the material wet. Think of these very similar to the N95 mask that we have, only a higher level. We don't want to put bleach or any decontamination solution on them. It'll degrade and damage the filtration material.
And then of course came the decontamination factor. That is the reason why my cartridges here have a faded stickers, because it has been thoroughly decontaminated multiple times. So many times we ended up working with our members, teaching our members, continuing to retrain our members, and getting used to using these APRs in all types of events. It's very simple and easy for us to go on a known EMS call with a gown, with an APR, and understand that we're going to be going full on EMS type of call. The difficulty came on in, and this has been continuing to go on through. We've had up to 19 members have to quarantine because of these confusions. Auto accidents, car fires, technical rescues, other types of events where we end up responding as a fire and rescue type of agency, and it very quickly becomes an EMS element, because of course we have that patient care and the APRs are sitting back on the fire engines. So one of the big things has been a significant disadvantage and learning curve for our members as they have gone up worked on codes or CPR calls without their proper PPE because their PPE was 200 feet away and we have to get in and take care of things. That has created a lot of time loss issues, potential for exposure and family exposure as well when these pieces of equipment are meant and created and purchased to protect our responders on the front line. A lot of questions our members continue to have is, how will this protect me seeing how a virus is so small? Of course, the virus, the COVID-19 virus, is very small, but it has to live within droplets, and those droplets are typically larger than 0.3 microns, which this filters out. What about the exhaled air? When we sit there and take a look at this in an occupational mindset, my ultimate goal and thought process with this mask is not to protect the public, it's to protect the responder. So these do have exhalation valves and there's no filter attached to that exhalation valve. So if we are COVID suspected or COVID positive, the exhaled air of potentially contaminated air is going out into the environment. These are just extra steps and questions that people had along the way as we went through this. But once again, it comes down to protecting ourselves. That's what we cared about and that's what we were focusing on throughout this entire escapade. As we continued on and carried on, we got more comfortable with using our APRs. We have a standby strap, almost like an SCBA. So during fires, usually not fires, but in post-fire events, during wildfires, during technical rescues, car accidents, all these other types of events, these masks started becoming a secondary standby piece of equipment. Who knows what next year or the future will say? But I expect to see these APRs in full-time use with our agency as a frontline piece of equipment, just like our gloves and our glasses. The APR will be a secondary common piece of a PPE that we have. Some of the difficulties, of course, with them is communication. Our medics that typically have to call back to the hospital for base station contact, they usually have to hop out of the medic unit and take the APR off so they can be understood. Sometimes radio communication is difficult. And then, of course, expressing ourselves and getting emotions through to a patient. We're trying to be a patient advocate for patient care. Sometimes that emotional concept that we have gets lost because half of our face is covered up, which we've all seen even without APRs because of our normal face coverings that we have. So that has provided a significant difficulty. One thing, the biggest reason I was trying to push for APRs prior to COVID was for responses outside a viral type of atmosphere. And I do feel that these can provide a lot of protection for us in the realm of post-fire monitoring, hazardous materials responses, and potentially wildland responses. I will fall on my own sword right now and talk about an event that I have on this far right picture. I have my engineer, he had a bandana on, and I was out on the fire ground for 12 hours approximately. And my thought process came across using this APR and putting it on, but the difficulty and the frustration of having to wear this during that event, a large brush fire, hot, smoky event, I decided not to. So it still comes down to a learning process for all of us and a comfort issue for all of us. Like everybody that's watching this video probably knows, at the beginning of COVID, we all could not stand wearing our face masks. But now it has just become second nature. I'm not gonna say it's comfortable, I'm not gonna say that we're all used to it and we all want to wear it, but we are all much more accustomed to wearing this with less restriction because we've gotten more accustomed to it. I think the same will go for APRs on our responses in the emergency response field. So it will take time, but the hope is to help filter out the particulates on brush fires as well as other types of events. My bottom left picture is an actual hazardous materials response that I responded on with another hazmat technician. We had symptomatic patients in adjacent apartment units where this apartment was being refurbished and they were using tile paint inside the bathroom. Those vapors from that tile paint ended up permeating throughout the structure and started creating nausea, dizziness, headaches, some issues that the patients were having, and we had to start navigating through the process of hazardous materials response. I responded with an APR with normal P100 filters. These only filter out dust. so they do not filter out any type of organic vapors, any type of products like that. My other hazmat tech was inside the room with this type of APR with the filter as well as a sorbent package. It was his normal APR that he had, and at our first response, because of lack of equipment at the time, we were only able to order these type of filters instead of these. The cost for these is approximately $15 to $20, where these are $30 to $40. So he was wearing this, and he was standing in a contaminated environment. The second I walked into the house, I identified immediately that there was an organic vapor, there was some type of flammable aromatic hydrocarbon, and my air monitor was going off likewise into the alarm state of a flammable environment. And he proceeded to take his fingers off from his mask, and he recognized very quickly that he was in a dangerous environment. So these types of cartridges can protect us, but they make us blind to the environment around us. So that was a very important thing to watch out for. And once again, on the learning aspect, I keep on working with my first responders, because we now have gone to these filters. They want to go back to these organic vapor cartridges because they don't want to smell the stinky patients. They don't want to smell the smoky patients. They don't want to smell the nasty type of calls. But this takes a tool out of our toolbox and tucks it away because it protects us. But cigarette smoke, bad smells on calls, bad body odor, other things like that, those are irritating, but those are not life safety type of hazards. So unless it's a significant call, we're trying to talk to our responders, use these type of filters so you can identify what's going on to make sure that you're safe in the environment. No doubt it's going to take a long time for us to learn the concepts with APRs and the protection factors with them. The wearing, the use, the decontamination, and the storage of these things are a significant change in department policies, in reaction periods, other things like that. But they definitely can help when we start talking about occupational awareness and exposure reporting. We've been very aware about the cancers and the chronic illnesses that face our first responders, EMS providers, law enforcement, fire department, all throughout this. This is another tool to help protect them. I recommend any agency to sit there and take a little bit of time and research to see if this is a good tool to help you out. These APRs are about $25, $35. These ones are about $45 to $50. And like I said, the cartridges, each of them are about $15 and then $40. So it's a significant initial cost, but the ongoing cost and the protection of our members is definitely worth it. And of course, on top of that, in the long run, after COVID finally dies down, if we have our members used to using these and wearing these, if we have another viral outbreak or other type of event like that, we will be more prepared and ahead of the curve, ready to respond safely for our community's needs. Thank you again. This has been Chris Pfaff with Oklahoma State University.